The Faithlessness of Sinogo. Somewhere off the northern coast of Mindanao, a strong current begins to travel northward. It runs to the island of Siquijor, and then turning slightly to the east, goes racing between the islands of Cebu and Negros. At the narrow entrance between San Sebastian and Ayucatan, it breaks up into hundreds of small whirlpools that make the water hiss and bubble for a distance of nearly 3 miles. For streamers and large boats, there is not the slightest danger, but to the native in his little sakayan, with its bamboo outriggers, these whirlpools are objects of dread and fear. He will go miles out of his way to escape them. If you inquire as to the reason, he will explain that the liluan, or whirlpool, is a thing always to be avoided, and then he will tell you the story of Sinogo. Years and years ago, when Mangwayan ruled the sea, and the terrible Kaptan launched his thunderbolts from above, the water and air were filled with swimming and flying monsters. Those that lived in the air were armed with great teeth and sharp claws. But though they were fierce and savage, they lived together in peace, for they feared the anger of their master Kaptan. In the sea, however, all was not so peaceful, for some of the monsters were so huge and savage, and so confident in their strength, that Mangwayan could do nothing with them. He lived in constant fear of attack from these fierce subjects, and finally, in despair, called on Kaptan to help him in his trouble. Accordingly, Kaptan sent his swift messengers to every part of the earth, air, and sea, and ordered that a council of all the creatures in the world should be held. He named the little island of Kauweli in the center of the Sulu Sea as the meeting place, and commanded all to hasten there without delay. Soon the members of the council began to arrive, and the sky was darkened by flying monsters, and the water boiled as the terrible reptiles of the sea rushed to the place appointed. In a short time, the little island was crowded with these dreadful creatures. There were huge buayas from Mindanao, fierce tikbolans from Luzon, savage sigbins from Negros and Bohol, hundreds of ungloks from Panay and Leyte, and great wakwaks and other frightful monsters from Samar and Cebu. They grouped themselves in a large circle around a golden throne, on which sat Kaptan and Mangwayan, and while waiting for the commands of their master, filled the air with shrieks and howls. At length, Kaptan raised his hand, and the noise instantly stopped. Then he announced his decree. He said that Mangwayan was his brother god, and should be treated with the same respect. He commanded all his subjects to obey the god of the sea, and told them that he would kill with the thunderbolt any that disobeyed his order. Then he desired all to return to their own regions, and again the air was filled with a noise of thunder, and the sea roared and foamed as the monsters went back to their homes. Soon there remained on the island only Kaptan, Mangwayan, and 3 messengers of Kaptan, who were called Sinogo, Dalagan, and Gidala. These were giants in size, and had large wings which enabled them to fly with great swiftness. They had long spears and sharp swords, and were very brave and powerful. Of the 3, Dalagan was the swiftest, Gidala the bravest, and Sinogo the handsomest, and best loved by Kaptan. When all the creatures were gone, Mangwayan thanked Kaptan, but the great god said that he had only done his duty in helping his brother. Then he gave Mangwayan a little golden shell, and explained to him its wonderful power. Mangwayan had but to put it in his mouth, and he could change his form to that of any creature he pleased. In case a monster, defying Kaptan's orders, should attack him, he had simply to change himself into a stronger monster, of twice the size of his enemy, and then fight and kill him easily. Again, Mangwayan thanked his brother god, and taking the shell, placed it on the throne beside him. Then Kaptan ordered his messengers to bring food and drink, and soon the 2 gods were feasting merrily. Now it happened that Sinogo had been standing behind the throne, and had heard all that had been said. He was filled with a desire to own the wonderful shell, and in spite of the many favors he had received from Kaptan, he resolved to steal it. The more he thought of its great power, the more he longed for it. With it, he could rule the earth and sea as a god, and by hiding, he might avoid the anger of Kaptan. So he watched for an opportunity to make away with it. Finally, his chance came. While handing Mangwayan some food, he slyly caught up the shell, and soon afterwards, quietly slipped away. For some time his absence was not discovered, but all at once, Kaptan called for his favorite messenger, and receiving no reply, ordered Dalagan to search for him. Soon Dalagan returned, and reported that Sinogo could not be found on the island. At the same time, Mangwayan noticed that the golden shell was gone. Then Kaptan knew that his messenger had stolen the shell and escaped. He flew into a great rage and swore he would kill Sinogo. He ordered Dalagan and Gidala to hasten to the north, in search of the faithless messenger, and to bring him back a prisoner. Swiftly northward, over the blue sea flew the messengers, and near the island of Guimaras, caught sight of Sinogo. He saw his pursuers, and flew all the swifter, but he was no match for them in speed. Nearer and nearer they came, and then drawing their swords, rushed forward to seize him. But Sinogo was not to be easily caught. Quick as a flash, he placed the shell in his mouth and dived down into the water, at the same time changing himself into a huge crocodile-shaped buwaya with scales like armor of steel. In vain, Dalagan and Gidala rained blows on the monster. The swords could not pierce the heavy scales. Up through Guimara Strait, the chase went on, and Sinogo tore up the water in his flight. So great was the disturbance of the ocean that as they rounded the northern coast of Negros, the waves dashed completely over the little island of Pacabac, sweeping away the hills and bringing the land to the level of the sea. Still the rapid flight went on. Straight for Bantayan headed Sinogo, but suddenly changing his course, he dashed into the narrow channel between Negros and Cebu. Then Dalagan, leaving Gidala to continue the chase alone, flew swiftly back to Kauweli and told Captan that Sinogo was in the little strait. Up sprang the god, and flying directly east, he posted himself at the southern entrance of the channel. In his hand, he held an enormous thunderbolt, and thus armed, he waited for the appearance of Sinogo. Down into the narrow entrance sped the faithless messenger, tearing up the water in his mad flight, while the brave Gidala struck in vain at his huge body. Suddenly, a roar of thunder sounded, and the thunderbolt fell on the back of the monster, bearing him down beneath the waves, and then stiffening like a bar of iron, pinning him to the bottom far below. In vain, he struggled to free himself. The bar held him fast and sure. In his struggles, the shell fell from his mouth, but a little tamban caught it, and brought it safely to Captan. Thousands of years have passed, but far under the water, like a fly on a pin, Sinogo struggles in the form of a huge buwaya. The water bubbles around him, and for 3 miles, little whirlpools go racing up the channel, and the native in his little sakayan avoids the narrow entrance, where the water boils and foams, for Sinogo still twists and squirms, and the liluan is a thing to be feared and dreaded. Catalina of Dumaguete. This is a legend of Dumaguete, the capital of the province of Negros Occidental. From this town can be seen the 5 islands of Visayas, Negros, Cebu, Bohol, Mindanao, and Siquijor. There is no one on the great island of Negros who does not love the name of Catalina. Even the wild mountain men speak it with respect, and down in the coast towns at night, when the typhoon is lashing the waters of Tanyon Strait, and the rain and wind make the nipa leaves on the roofs dance and rattle, the older people gather their little black-eyed grandchildren around the shell of burning coconut oil and tell them her story. Many years ago, there lived in Dumaguete a poor tuba seller named Banog, who made his daily rounds to the houses, just as the milkman does in far-off America. But instead of a rattling wagon, he had only a long bamboo from which he poured the drink, and in place of sweet milk, he left the sap of the coconut tree. The bad custom of mixing tungyod, a kind of red bark with the sap, and thus making of it a strong liquor, had not yet been known, so Banog, though poor, was respected, and the people tried in every way to help him and his daughter Catalina. Catalina was a beautiful girl of 16, and very good and industrious, but with many strange ways. She scarcely ever spoke a word, and spent most of her time in looking out over the sea. Sometimes she would suddenly stand erect, and clasping her hands, would remain for a long time, looking up at the sky as if she saw something that no one else could see. On account of these strange manners, the people thought her a wonderful girl, and she was supposed to have mysterious powers. One day, many ships came from the island of Mindanao, and hundreds of fierce Moros landed. Shouting and waving their terrible knives, they fell upon the peaceful people and killed many, among them poor Banog. Then they robbed and burned the houses, and seizing all the women they could find, set sail for the great southern island. Among the prisoners was Catalina. With her eyes fixed on the sky, she sat very quiet and still, in the bow of one of the boats, and though her companion spoke often to her, she made no reply. Suddenly, she sprang into the water, and a wonderful thing occurred, for instead of sinking, she walked lightly over the waves toward the distant shore. The Moros were so astonished that they did not try to stop her, and she reached the land safely. Many people who had hidden in the forests ran out to meet her, but she spoke to no one. With her eyes still fixed above, she walked through the burning town, and along the road to the Lugdog, the thunder mountain that lies behind Dumaguete. On the Lugdog, there lived a terrible Sigbin. Its body was like that of a monstrous crow, but just under its neck were 2 long legs, like those of a grasshopper, which enabled it to leap great distances without using its wings. It ate anyone who came near its home, so when the people saw Catalina start to climb the mountain, they begged her to come back. She paid no heed to their cries, however, but went up higher and higher, till her white dress seemed merely a speck on the mountainside. All at once she seemed to stop and raise her hands. Then a fearful shriek was heard, and the fierce Sigbin came rushing down the mountain. It appeared to be greatly frightened, for it took tremendous leaps and screamed as if in terror. Over the heads of the people it jumped, and reaching the shore, cleared the narrow channel, and disappeared among the mountains of the island of Cebu. When the people saw that the Sigbin had gone, they ran up the mountain and searched everywhere for Catalina, but they could find no trace of her. Sorrowfully, they returned to their homes and busied themselves in building new houses, and in making their town beautiful once more. Several years passed in peace, and then again, the Moro boats came up from Mindanao. The men hurriedly gathered on the beach to meet them, and the women and children hid in the coconut groves. This time the Moros had no quick and easy victory, for the Visayans, armed with bolos and remembering their lost wives and sisters, fought furiously, and for a time drove the enemy before them. But more Moro boats arrived, and numbers told against the defenders. Slowly but surely, they fell fighting, until but a few remained. Suddenly, a bridge of clouds unfolded from Dalugdug to the town, and across it came the lost Catalina, holding a beehive in her hands. Then she spoke, and thousands of bees flew from the hive to the ground. Again she spoke, and waved her hand, and the bees changed into little black men with long sharp spears, who charged the Moros and killed every one of them. Then Catalina, the hive still in her hand, went back over the bridge and disappeared once more in the mountain. The people came out of their hiding places, crowding around the little black men and questioning them, but they received no answer. Instead, the little warriors gathered together and ran into the forest and up the mountainside, where they were soon lost to view. Such is the story of Catalina. Since that time, Dumaguete has been safe from the Moros. The Sigbin has never returned to Negros. It still lives in the mountains of Cebu, and the people are so afraid of it that they lock themselves in their houses after dark, and can hardly be induced to come out. Up in the mountains of Negros live the little black men. They are called Negritos, and are very savage and wild. The savior of Dumaguete still lives in Dalugdug, and is worshipped by the people. And in the town, now grown into a big busy city, the old people for years to come will tell their grandchildren the story of Catalina. The Fall of Polobuec. This is a tale from Panay. It probably originated with the Spanish fathers, who wished to impress the doctrine of the 7 deadly sins on the natives. The islands are just off Iloilo. A little way from Iloilo, there once was a beautiful island called Polobuec, or Isle of Flowers. Its shores were covered with beautiful trees and plants. Splendid gardens of flowers were found everywhere. Fruits grew in abundance. Fountains sparkled in the sunlight, and the people were the happiest in the world. They danced and sang to gay music, and were free from every care and sorrow. Filled with confidence in their good fortune, and proud of their beautiful island, they began to slight the people of the neighboring islands, and to treat them with insolence and scorn. One night, the sky was darkened, the lightning flashed, the rain fell in torrents, and a voice cried from the clouds, above the roar of the thunder,
"I am Pride. Avoid me, or perish."
Terrified, they prayed to God for protection. But with the morning sun, their fears left them, and they continued as before. Days passed, and the people grew richer, but not satisfied with their wealth, and with their own beautiful island, they longed to possess the lands of their neighbors. Again came the storm, and again a voice cried from the heavens, "I am Covetousness. Come to me and die." Once more, they appealed for protection, but they did not change their ways. Weeks went by, and with wealth came low and base desires. The storm came as before, and brought the warning,
"I am evil desire. Fly from me, or be lost."
But again, it sounded to sealed ears. Months rolled on. The people quarreled with their neighbors, and sent forth an army to make war upon them. The voice thundered,
"I am anger. I give eternal torment."
Years followed, and the tables of the people of Polobuec were loaded with the finest foods and wines. Day and night found them feasting. The cry sounded above them,
"I am gluttony. I devour my children."
Time flew by. Each man sought to outdo the others in display of luxury and magnificence. The poor grudged the rich their fortunes, and sought in every way to injure them. Again a voice came through the darkness, "I am envy. My people are condemned." But they closed their ears and would not hear. More wealth brought greater luxury. They lolled in idleness. They idled in the midst of magnificence. The voice warned,
"I am sloth. I bring final warning."
They were used to the voices now, and gave them not the slightest heed. Their insolence and greed grew greater. The fair island shook with dissension and strife. One day, the sun was hidden by blackness. A fearful tempest burst over the land. The people on the other island saw Polobuec wrapped in 7 huge pillars of flame. When the sky cleared, Polobuec was nowhere to be seen. In its place, 7 blackened rocks marked the spot where stood the beautiful isle. They are there to this day. You can see them as you leave the harbor for southern ports. Sometimes they appear as one. Again, they seem to group in 2s and 3s. But there are 7. They are called the Deadly Sins.